Chapter 19. Richard Sides' hand ached with a pain he hadn't felt since the night of his original injury. During the brief scuffle indoors, the junior Gerald Haidt had managed to kick the wooden door shut, right as Sides reached for it. He was leaning forward, his left arm extended, when only his fingers made contact with the edge. Instinctively, he tried to pull back, but the door slammed against the inside of his palm, crushing the top of his hand against the frame. He shouted a string of colorful words before the pain even registered. In the seconds before the throbbing set in, Sides caught himself imagining all the places he'd rather be. Inside the house, Eckhart hovered over the junior Gerald Haidt, struggling to control the boy's flailing arms. Making matters worse, the boy's mother clung to him, desperately trying to drag him upright. Amid the chaos, the senior Gerald Haidt finally stepped through the door. He grabbed Eckhart's shoulder and elbow, attempting to pull the massive man off his son, but it was no use. He was too old, too frail, and his efforts were more nuisance than threat. The spectacle dragged on for nearly 5 minutes before Richard Sides finally composed himself enough to step in. With both investigators now inside, the balance of power shifted. A chorus of shouting erupted from every corner of the room. Though the wrestling had ceased, the junior Gerald remained sprawled on the floor, refusing to stand. Instead, he glared upward and shouted defiance, his angry words ricocheting off the men towering over him. The atmosphere in the room was unreadable. Heat clung to the air, the result of exertion and the breath of 5 agitated bodies. No one was listening. Logic had evaporated, replaced by blunt shows of authority and ego. Everyone had regressed into something more primitive, angry, posturing animals. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the storm seemed to blow itself out. The cause was unclear. Most likely, everyone had simply worn themselves down. A heavy silence settled across the room. Haidt's parents braced themselves against nearby furniture to stay upright. Eckhart and Sides felt their throats raw from shouting, and the Sides' left hand still throbbed with sharp radiating pain. The emotional crash was brutal. Mrs. Haidt gave a breathless laugh before breaking into sobs. Her husband, too shaken to comfort her, muttered a few hollow phrases, his heart pounding and his balance too unsteady to cross the room. At last, Sides helped the junior Gerald Haidt to his feet. The young man tried to jerk away, but Sides caught him by the elbow and held on. Eckhart tapped Sides on the shoulder and nodded toward the front door. He wanted the boy away from his parents. None of this had gone as planned. Eckhart knew he'd acted rashly. Storming into someone's home was never wise and certainly never safe. Still, the 2 men guided the younger Haidt toward the front door. Eckhart stepped outside first, holding the screen door open. Sides followed, tugging Haidt along with a bit more force than necessary. Once outside, they turned to face him and finally took in the full extent of the damage. "What happened to you?" Eckhart asked. "We didn't do that, did we?" Sides added. Gerald Haidt was a wreck. Several days had passed since the adherents of the divine winds had attacked him, and the evidence was still written across his body. His face and neck were mottled with bruises. One black eye was only beginning to fade. With his clergy robes gone, the rest was impossible to miss. His arms were blotched with deep blue bruises, his shoulders marked by impact injuries from the car crash that night. But the bruising around his neck was different. That had come from being nearly strangled to death. He was alive, and that was something. But the man standing before them was only a shadow of who he'd been. Both Eckhart and Sides realized all at once that they were staring. Embarrassed, they straightened and forced themselves to look past the damage. "Who the hell are you two?" Haidt demanded. "My name's Brian. This is Richard," Eckhart said. "How do you do?" Sides added with a curt nod. "That doesn't explain anything. Who are you and what do you want from me?" Haidt pressed. He was calmer now, his voice more measured. The cool autumn air funneled between the men like wind cutting through downtown streets. A sudden gust slipped into Eckhart's ear, and he turned his head against it. Sides, meanwhile, felt oddly refreshed by the breeze, and noticed with some surprise that the throbbing in his hand had faded. The tension was lifting. As if a veil had been pulled away, his mind finally cleared. "Alfonso Silva," Sides said suddenly. The name stopped Haidt cold. What about him?" he asked. "What do you know about him?" Eckhart pressed. "I know a little," Haidt admitted. "I know he was from here originally. He was the same rank in the clergy as I was, but he didn't go through the program here. He trained at a seminary in California, or maybe the East Coast. I can't remember exactly. All I really know is that he came here after being granted priesthood and started working with the outreach program for the homeless." "What else?" Sides asked. "Well, obviously I know that he died suddenly." "Cut it, Gerald. They found his body ripped apart in his car," Sides snapped. Haidt went silent. The tension in the air thickened again, and Eckhart quickly decided to steer things away before they lost ground. "Forget Silva for a second," he said. "What happened to you?" "My face?" Haidt asked, raising a hand to his cheek. "Yes," Eckhart said. "I got in a car accident." "What about your neck?" Sides pressed. "What's wrong with my neck? I told you, I got in a car accident." Sides exhaled sharply. "Gerald, I used to be a police officer. I've seen thousands of car accidents, and I can tell you this, whatever happened to your neck didn't come from one. I've seen marks like that before, on women who told me the same story. Domestic violence, Gerald. That's what it looks like. And considering your parents are nearly 70 and you're a celibate member of the clergy, that means someone else tried to choke you. Who was it?" Haidt froze. Terror flickered across his face, plain and unguarded. He didn't speak, but he didn't have to. His expression told both men everything they needed to know. Someone had tried to kill him, and he wasn't going to name them. He wasn't a bad person, but he was clearly outmatched. Clinging to the car accident lie had carried him this far, but now the facade had collapsed. The silence stretched. Realizing they wouldn't stop pressing, Haidt surrendered. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then looked down at the ground and swallowed hard before trying once more. "I don't exactly know who," Haidt finally said. "What the hell happened?" Eckhart asked. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I trusted them," Haidt blurted, his voice climbing. "Trusted who?" Sides asked, moving closer to the door to block any escape. "The Adherents. I trusted them. I trusted Cardinal Wen. For so long, they never asked me to do anything important, just morning prayers and college outreach. I was begging for something more, and then my break finally came." Haidt's hands flailed as he spoke, punctuating his words with sharp gestures. He pressed his fingers against his chest as though trying to convince himself he mattered. It was the story he had wanted to tell, but never could. God only knew what version he'd told his parents. "Stay with me, Gerald," Sides said. "What break?" "It was in the morning, right after prayers. I thought he was angry with me. Cardinal Wen never summoned me to his private office. I'd only been in there once when I first accepted the college outreach position. But that morning, he invited me upstairs. That was highly unusual." "What happened upstairs?" Eckhart asked. "He sat me down and asked if I was a loyal member of the Adherents of the Divine Winds. I told him yes, that I would do anything to protect their good name," Haidt said, his voice growing more erratic with every word. "Protect them from what?" Sides pressed, arms now spread wide to block the porch. "I don't know. He just asked, and I said I was willing to do whatever he needed. I was one of the only priests with a valid driver's license. He told me to take the car to an address, Alfonso's house, the one he was staying in. Cardinal Wen said Alfonso had relapsed into drug use and gone rogue. He claimed Alfonso had stolen adherent property and planned to sell it on the black market. I believed him. I believed him." Haidt's eyes filled with tears as his voice cracked. He bent at the waist, coughing before dry heaving violently. Sides feared he was slipping into delirium. He stepped off the porch, leaving the door exposed, and placed a steadying hand on Haidt's back. "Are you all right?" Sides asked. Haidt spat on the ground and slowly straightened up. "I'm all right. I'll be all right," he said, raising his hands as if to prove it. "Gerald," Eckhart said calmly, "what did the Cardinal want you to do?" "He told me to go to the address, find a way in, and retrieve the items Alfonso had stolen. That was it. He said if I did this for him, he'd consider me for the senior clergy," Haidt said. His voice had steadied, but the wild swings in his emotions were clearly wearing him down. "What were you looking for?" Sides asked, keeping a steadying hand on Gerald's back. "There's a set of holy texts reserved for the senior clergy," Haidt explained. "Each level of the adherence builds on the one below it. Lay people only get the basics. Junior clergy are given more, but it's still incomplete. Senior clergy study what we can't. And the cardinals, we're taught their knowledge is beyond our understanding. If you're one of the lucky few, you can work your way up by studying that material. But one rule is absolute. You never share it with anyone who isn't cleared to read it. Did Alfonso steal this material? Sides asked. Not exactly, Haidt said. There's only one copy per district, and the cardinal always keeps it locked away. Wen told me he'd allowed Alfonso to read some passages so he could prepare for promotion to senior clergy. That process can take years. Certain passages have to be memorized word for word. Candidates are allowed to study the text daily until they're ready. But you can't copy them. Ever. Wen said he caught Alfonso doing just that one afternoon. Before he could seize the notes, Alfonso pushed his way out and disappeared. The cardinal wanted you to find these notes? Sides asked. Precisely. He told me journalists would pay a fortune for copies of senior clergy material, Haidt said. There's a whole movement online of former members who call the Adherents a cult. They've never managed to flip a senior clergy member, so the next best thing is getting their hands on the material. So you were after Alfonso's notes, Eckhart said. That's not all. There was something else I was supposed to retrieve. What else? Eckhart asked. The cardinal said a small idol was missing from his private shrine, Haidt replied. The reference slid past Eckhart, but Sides felt a deep, hollow dread. He stepped back from Haidt, pulling his hand away as his mind reeled. He barely heard the next few words, drifting into his own thoughts as the conversation carried on without him. What sort of idol? Sides finally asked, snapping back. Haidt hesitated, surprised by the question. I can't really remember. It was small enough to carry in one hand, he said, miming the shape with his right hand. He said it was black, made of stone, about the size of a paperback novel. I remember he told me not to touch it, just wrap it in paper and bring it straight back. Sides brought a hand to his mouth, the weight of recognition settling in. Eckhart and Haidt were still talking, oblivious to the storm building behind his expression. Sides stared at the ground, his gaze fixed on his shoes as the realization sank in. For over a week he had doubted his own sanity. Even after entering the void for the second time, a sliver of disbelief had remained. But now, on this immaculate lawn, speaking to a man he barely knew, he had stumbled on the proof he'd been seeking. The idol. The grotesque, carved object was the key. It opened the passage to the void. But why? And how had Alfonso Silva discovered that truth, and what had he planned to do with it? Sides looked up at the other two men, their mouths still moving as they continued their conversation. He blinked once, then twice, before forcing himself back into the present. Okay, so you were in the living room when the man pulled up? Eckhart asked. Right. He pulled up and I panicked, Haidt admitted. I hadn't found any of the material I was looking for, so I decided to leave. I went out the back door and tried to hop the fence. He saw me immediately and shouted for me to stop. I ran for the car to grab the keys, but I was so scared I dropped them. He was coming right at me, so I bolted. You ran? You left the car behind? Eckhart pressed. I did. I just wanted out of there, Haidt said, frowning. He lifted his hands in a helpless gesture. I didn't know where to go. I had no money and I knew he could track the car, so I just ran. Where to? Eckhart asked. Nowhere, really. I turned randomly until I didn't recognize where I was. Eventually, I had to walk all the way back to the compound. My feet were raw by the time I got there, and my lower back felt like it was on fire. What caused all the bruises? Sides asked, stepping back into the conversation. That man, the one who came to the house. Turns out he's a detective. He ran the plates and showed up at the compound. One of the students let him in. I was asleep when he came into my room and put me in cuffs, Haidt said. He started asking questions, but I didn't have any clever answers. He arrested me on the spot and took me downtown. What happened downtown? Eckhart asked. It was 8 hours of hell, Haidt said. He kept hammering me about Alfonso Silva's murder, why I ran, what I was doing there. He said burglary was a felony and I could be looking at 5 years. I told him the back door was open, that I hadn't broken in, and that I hadn't stolen anything. He said it didn't matter. Then he said I could be charged as an accessory to murder if I didn't cooperate. But I didn't know anything. I couldn't give him what he wanted. Sometime near 3 in the morning, he stepped out. Someone else came in and told me I was free to go. He must have gotten the call, Eckhart said. What happened then? The same guy walked me down a flight of stairs. He pointed to a door and said I'd hear a buzzer. When it went off, the next door would open. I stepped through and was in the lobby. I remember thinking how I was going to get back to the compound on foot. That area is dangerous enough during the day with all the transients hanging around. At night, it's a horror show. How did you get back to the compound? Eckhart asked. I didn't, Haidt said. When I got to the parking lot, Cardinal Wen and 2 men I'd never seen before were waiting. Waiting for you? Sides asked, his voice tight. Yeah, they had a car and Cardinal Wen told me to get in. On the ride home, he started questioning me. It got heated, and then he said something I didn't understand. One of the men in the back seat lunged at me and started strangling me. I thought I was going to die, but then a drunk driver swerved into our lane and hit us head on. The guy choking me went face first into the dash. When I came to, I unlatched the door and crawled out. All 3 of them were still trapped inside the car. Haidt took a deep breath and stared blankly into the distance. Sides and Eckhart watched closely as he processed the upheaval in his life. Though battered and bruised, something fundamental had shifted. He understood now, with painful clarity, that the adherents and their doctrines were hollow. The promises of correcting human behavior, easing suffering, and delivering universal justice seemed trivial after what he had endured. Gerald Haidt was a changed man. Having brushed so close to death, he could finally see what he wanted from life. Peace. I made my way back here, he said at last, still staring off. I had no idea what they would say. They've always been so supportive of me. I'm their only son. His lower lip trembled. The truth had settled over him like a heavy tide. It was never easy to admit you'd been wrong, and it was worse still to realize how much time you'd wasted. Time was a luxury that never returned. His thoughts drifted to his parents, the countless times they'd urged him not to go deeper into the adherents, warnings he had brushed aside. They had been right all along, if only he had listened sooner. Gerald, can we get back to the idol? Sides asked gently. He hated breaking the silence, but he had to know. Haidt stood there a moment longer, unmoving. He inhaled, cleared his throat, and set his hands on his hips as a breeze swept across the yard, cool and refreshing. He glanced to the corner of his eye, as if searching for the memory. The specifics were difficult to recall. I think I saw it, maybe on the bookshelf, Haidt said. Come to think of it, his expression suddenly shifted, eyes wide with shock. Sides and Eckhart heard it too. The squeal of tires. Headlights swept across the neighborhood as a black sedan barreled down the street. Before they could react, the car screeched to a violent stop in front of the Haidt home. Its windows were down, and shadowy figures moved inside, craning for a look at the 3 men. Dear God, they're here, Haidt screamed. He bolted past Sides, sprinting inside and shouting as he went. Sides turned to watch him disappear, then spun back toward the sedan. Summer wind, the driver yelled. Eckhart's hand shot behind his back, reaching instinctively for a pistol that wasn't there. The driver, catching the motion, panicked. Someone inside the car screamed at him to drive, and the sedan shot forward. Eckhart's hand closed on nothing as the car blew through the stop sign and accelerated into the curve. A second sedan roared onto the street moments later, headlights glaring. The engine's growl was deafening. Both men ducked, bracing for gunfire, as Eckhart bluffed again, reaching behind his back as if armed. The windows on the second car were also down, figures shifting inside. Whether the bluff worked or not, the sedan gained speed as it closed on the house, then tore past without stopping. This time the driver wasn't as lucky. A horn blared as another vehicle swerved to avoid a collision, clipping the sedan's rear quarter panel. Metal shrieked, sparks flying, but the prowler didn't stop. Its crumpled rear end sparking against the pavement, the car vanished into the distance. Somewhere behind them, a woman screamed. Her vehicle had stopped perpendicular across 2 lanes of traffic, horns blaring in the night. Dear God, Sides shouted. What was that? Eckhart yelled back. These people are insane. Go check on Gerald and call 911. I'm going to that lady, Sides ordered, already sprinting toward the street. Eckhart turned without a word and ran for the screen door. Inside, he found chaos. Haidt's parents rushed to meet him, clutching at his arms as they babbled that Gerald had shoved past them and gone out the back. He was already gone, they said, over the fence and swallowed by the night. Eckhart stepped out into the backyard, staring into the darkness. The distant sound of engines and car horns echoed through the neighborhood. He prayed Gerald Haidt was still alive.